Okay, we are recording. I'll call the meeting to order. This is the Oline Affordable Housing Commission, a special meeting Thursday, January 27th, 2022 at 5:05 p.m. And in attendance, we have Bill Belluzzi, Amy Hosier, Jen Miller, and myself, Michael Fogliano. If there's no objection, I will seat Amy Hosier as a regular member tonight, since we know we're going to have an opening there.
No objection.
Okay. And with that, I'll do a quick run through the agenda. We're going to follow up on our discussion from the regular meeting about the ADU provisions in Public Act 2129, and I have some thoughts on how to proceed with that, and we'll go through those. We spend the bulk of the time this evening going through the materials in preparation for the community workshop that we have scheduled for February 15th. And this is a special meeting, so we can't modify the agenda. So I left room for brief updates on some work in progress, the Oline events article and the ARPA proposal, if we have time. If not, we can defer those and pick them up next time we have a regular meeting. So without further ado, regarding PA 2129. So quick background, Public Act 2129 has provisions in it that regard accessory dwelling units and allow those to be developed as of right, without going through public hearings and the rest of the processes that would be attendant to it being treated as a special case. And if towns don't opt out of, the towns have an option to opt out of those provisions as part of the legislation by the January 1st of 2023. If towns do not opt out, then the state regulations supersede town regulations on accessory dwelling units. And if the town does opt out, then things revert to the local regulations. And there's a third option there, which is towns can replace their current regulations with something that's neither the current local or the state regulations. So as we discussed, and as we've been discussing, ADUs are appearing as one of the core elements of our strategy, and it's very likely that as we go through our planning discussion that we're going to have recommendations to consider zoning changes that would enable accessory dwelling units. This being driven by the increasing senior population and the decreasing household size that's projected to continue into the future. So for one-person households and for seniors, ADUs can be very useful. It's based on my reading of the minutes from the Zoning Commission. They're about to take up a discussion on opting out, which is fine. It's a discussion that needs to happen. We also have part of our charge an advisory role, so that when there are matters like this that are relevant to affordable housing, that we provide input to the land use boards and commissions. So it's incumbent on us to not be a spectator in this one, actually to join the conversation. So we went through the regulation last time, and there's a discussion yet to be had. So here's a proposal that I have that we can talk about. So instead of necessarily going to the Zoning Commission, and also the Planning Commission and the Board of Selectmen, who are part of the process, and I would say the Land Use Department, we would go to them and hold short of making any specific recommendation on whether or not to opt out or to take the third option and replace, but to request being part of a conversation about this, so that we can we can provide input to the process about what our current thinking is about ADUs and what the benefits might be. And with recognition that there could be valid reasons why the town does want to opt out, but at least do our part to make sure that the aspects that could be positive from the context of affordable housing are part of the discussion and are understood, and then take it from there. So what that might look like is us just sending a memo to the zoning commission first, because I've seen it that it's on their agenda for February, as well as the planning commission and the board of selectmen and the land use department, just to state what I just did, that there is an interest from the perspective of affordable housing in some of the provisions that are in 2129, and that before any opt-out procedure is triggered, that we request that we have a conversation about that and explore all of the options that might be available to the town in moving forward. Again, with recognition that there may be very good reasons to go down that path. So I'll stop there.
I think that's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, first of all, I think it would. I was, when I was reading through this, why I was having difficulty was that there were so many pieces of what the legislation, what the town could or could no longer be able to do in there, and things that I didn't quite even understand or understand the implications of. But in any event, the bottom line is that they can opt out. And I was trying to read through there originally, if the opt-out required them to do anything, prove anything, say anything, the opt-out requires them to do nothing. So I think it's it's more than reasonable. If I were in their position, I would probably want to opt out. I can't see what the benefit to Old Lyme of not opting out would be. And however, then I think it's incumbent upon us to talk about the kinds of things that we think are important as related to affordable housing. Pretty much what you just said. But I think in order to do that, we've got to become more understanding of what are some specific things. And I'm not aware of all the zoning things, but what are the kinds of things that we think would make it would make our zoning laws more or regulations more hospitable to people using ADUs as a way to increase our affordable housing.
Right, and I'm not sure that I completely agree, Bill. I'm pretty confident actually that just amongst ourselves, we're not going to have that level of understanding. So that's why I was thinking our request would be just to join the conversation so we can learn as well as provide input.
But I think it might be important, and maybe this is where RiverCog could be. In other words, we are on the conversation, we listen, it could get technical. Maybe RiverCog could point out or help us to ascertain, well, you may not get rid of it. It's not going to be an as of right, but it might be good if these things could be included in the in new regulations and so on.
Yeah, I think that the it's a good idea. Definitely, I think sometimes the zoning commission moves ahead without getting all their ducks in a row as far as information and background goes. They do have lively discussions during the meeting, but I'm not sure that they're all prepared for the conversation when they get to the meeting. So I think it would be really good to just maybe pause a little bit, maybe we slow them down a little bit from a decision, and try to help inform it, have them make an informed decision. versus, something that they're just going to see as like sort of take as face value. But I don't think they're necessarily opposed to it or, opposed to anything in there. I think they just would kind of stand up for the little town and and opt out just because. So I don't know if that's the right decision or not. There's also a group, CCM. Are you familiar with CCM, Michael?
Not. I was going to ask you what that acronym stands for.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about it for a minute. It's Connecticut something, but it's I believe it's a nonprofit group, but they summarize legislation that comes out of the state in a more digestible form.
To the Council of Municipalities?
That might be it. Yeah,
Mm.
I'll look it up. But it's they like for the Board of Ed, for instance, we get a lot of stuff from them that kind of tells us about what legislation happened, and then they summarize it in a more digestible format, that people can understand. And it's free, and they're to be used as a resource for people, so you can actually ask them questions like, what does this mean, in layman's terms, or what's the impact? So might be worth just tagging them. I could just shoot them off a note, and because I get their newsletters every week, and just see if that could be a resource. Maybe we could turn it into something that's more discussion wise versus the legalese that we're all having a little bit of a struggle with.
Good. So then the sequence of events would be, if we go down this path, we could send them just a note to the principals in this that are going to have to actually implement any decision to opt out, and just say we'd like to join the discussion before you get too far down this path. And then in parallel, we can marshal some of the resources we might be able to have, so that we can come in with something substantive into the conversation.
Good idea.
I think you can feel free to go ahead and do what we have to do to get them to know that we want to be part of the conversation. And then I think at the same time, we should be trying to get more information, because I think the biggest part of it is as of right. That's a huge thing to turn over. I mean, obviously they do have some restrictions on sizing and so on that are part of the legislation on the square footage and all of that. But, to be able to just say, okay, you don't need our approval, and that is a big thing. And I really understand that. So
I'll need to check this, Bill, but I'm not sure as of right means you can do whatever you want. It just means that I believe, and I will check this, that you still have to conform with the basic regulations. It just means that it doesn't get treated as a special case where you have to have a hearing and
That's true. It's always as of right. You have to comply with the restrictions and requirements of that category, but it doesn't impose a burden.
so currently
There's less of a struggle to get to those requirements. There's less of a threshold to meet to reach those requirements.
it's actually not less, I don't think. My understanding is, and again, I'll caveat that, I'll double check this, but basically it means that they have to meet the same requirements that anybody else would, and not additional ones.
Yeah.
It doesn't lower the bar. It
Okay.
just does not raise the bar.
So the
That's
town
my
can't
understanding.
impose anything additionally
Once
on
again, I'll
top.
disclaim that, but Amy, if that's consistent with your experience too, then.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so step one will be to request a seat at the table, and then we'll go off and do some more research and try to actually come to that table with something to say. Good. All right, anything else on that one? All right. So on to the main event for this evening, at least, which is going through the very early draft materials that are being put together for our first community workshop, which is going to be on February 15th. It's a Tuesday. at 7 p.m. and it's going to be held via Zoom. And the Rivercog folks will actually run the Zoom session, which will be great, and take the recording and do that. Just a quick side note, since I presume we're going to have a quorum there of our commission, and this will be officially hosted by our commission, then this is going to be a special meeting. So we're going to be under FOIA requirements. So we're going to need to post an agenda, record the meeting, post minutes, and go through all of the things that we would do. Even though this is a public meeting and it's being advertised to the public to join, it's a legally public meeting. So we're going to go through all of that as well. So we're set right now. The overall flow of the meeting is there'll be the normal introductions and welcomes. The first part of the meeting is going to be some background on the situation of what is affordable housing in Old Lyme, about the commission, an introduction to our current thinking on strategy and the forces at work. So just to lay the groundwork and then sort of put it out there what the current thinking is. And go ahead, Amy.
Pardon me. Well, that will all be you, not Rivercog, correct?
Correct. Okay. It'll be us. So I don't know. I'll be prepared to do it, but we could have an ensemble as well. But that'll be on the commission for that, to present that. Then we'll hand the keys over to Rivercog or the consultants to take a deeper dive on the data. And if you had a look there, first of all, there's a ton of it. So we're going to have to work with keeping that at an altitude and a level of digestibility that the folks in the audience who haven't been immersed in this for years will be able to deal with, and sprinkle it liberally with key takeaway messages. But as you've looked through that, I hope you've seen what I've seen, which is there's plenty of support for some of the thinking that has been developed up to now. Some unto compelling support for it. Then there will be an opportunity for an interactive session where they can actually do real-time polling and put a few questions up and get real-time responses from the audience, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, they did a nice job with that. I thought they did a nice job with that meeting the other day. I think the four of us at least were there.
I thought so too.
Yeah.
So the key there, and we don't have a lot on this yet, so is to actually come up with those questions so that they're meaningful, and the feedback from those questions will actually give us guidance on what the community is thinking. So in the materials, I wouldn't look at anything in there as being anywhere near final. That's just placeholders, essentially at this point. And then we'll open it up for just some Q&A and some discussion, and then adjourn. So those are the major sections. So I sent 2 slide packs to you. One was one that I prepared based on a lot of the work we'd done up to now, and also drew on some of the stuff that Rivercog and the consultants had put together. And we'll walk through those. And the second pack I sent you was prepared by the Rivercog consultant, Karen Martin, who did a really nice job. And actually the pack that I put together overlays the first 16 slides in the pack that Karen had made. So we'll start on Karen's deck at slide 17 when you go to that. So the way this works now is the current draft flow for this is the slides that I sent in that first pack, and then picking it up at about slide 17 in Karen's pack, and that's how it would go. And there's a lot of placeholders in there and notes to ourselves on how to proceed and things to incorporate. But if there's any general comments, I'll take now, but if not, we can kind of go through it page by page or chunk by chunk at least, and I'll take some notes. And I'm scheduled to meet with Karen next week to bake in feedback that we'll generate tonight and that she's getting from her team and from the RiverCog folks. And then we'll do another lap around this track over the next week or so. And by then, hopefully be able to send out a unified set of materials and a firmed up agenda, and also have taken a pretty good stab at what the real-time feedback questions would be, besides what's your favorite color. So if you like, then we can just kind of jump in and go through this.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
All right. So let's start with the,
Just
go ahead.
Just one quick thing about the data, the either population data, the stuff that was called into question, that was being called into question at the meeting the other night, and they said that they would be certain to make sure that the data would be the most up to date. And then there was some back and forth over, this is the 2021 data for certain things. Jen raised the question about it being different from some of the Department of Ed, some of the Board of Ed data that they got. My only concern, or the thing that was going on in my head, was just to make sure that we don't get bogged down with misconceptions about the data, especially since yes, things have changed in the short run anyway, in the past year or so for a town like Old Lyme. So that's it. I just want to make sure that that's going to be adequately dealt with.
Yeah, I agree, Bill. I think we need to deal with that up front. And here's my take, which is I've been through these data up to my ears for a while now, and some of there's the census data, which is based on 2020 and 2010 and 2020, and the 2020 census data is still rolling out. Then there are the secondary and tertiary and quaternary analyses that are done that are from 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and there'll be more coming out in 2022. So as we've gone through all these, if you dive down into the real granular numbers, some of them have changed. But if you look at the trends and the directions that would really influence our strategic thinking on this, hasn't changed that much. So when you look at the demographics, yeah, maybe the projections have fluttered a little bit, but there's been no reversal in the aging trend. And there's been no suggestion that all of a sudden we're going to go from a population that's shrinking to a population that's growing. So I think we can manage this up front by saying, yep, there's a lot of data from a lot of different points there, but the altitude we're working at is above that. And we're pulling out the long-term indicators and trends that are going to inform our strategy and at a level where we can be confident about that. Plus, going forward, we monitor the data so that if there are any material changes in the indicators or the trends, that we're aware of it and prepared to respond to it. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, as long as we address that in some way. I would hate for people to have the wrong thing to throw wrenches into the works. For example, if it says school age population is declining is a general thing, and something different has come out of Board of Education meetings or publications, that's an exact opposite of that. And I don't know if that's the case or not, but that's the thing I just want to make sure we're prepared for.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we got that cleared up. I think, Bill, and to your point, my concern was just that we're presenting a town referendum basically on increasing the school building size because of increasing enrollment. So it shouldn't be anything to do with affordable housing, really. So I mean, not anything, but they're not directly correlated. The needs of affordable housing and our plan or not directly correlated with, we have 40 more, kids under 10 moving into the town, so they're not, it's not a kind of one-to-one thing, but the general trend is, as you noted, is that the elderly population is declining. Those 5-bedroom colonial homes are going to be on the market, and who's going to move in there? Young families with kids. So
Jen, did you get that, the table I sent you
I
today?
did super appreciate it. That was very helpful. Yeah.
Cool. I had remembered seeing that, and hopefully that rationalizes that whole little
Yeah.
micro demographic there.
Triangulated now. We have 3. So to Bill's point, we have 3 data points now from 3 data sources that are all respected by the state of Connecticut.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we've triangulated, that all the young kids are are increasing. So.
But to your point, Bill, and I just took a note with an asterisk on it again to make sure that we talk about the data and what its sources are and how we're using it and how we can make sure we're not misled by it. So it's a good one. And there's a ton of it. Okay, so on the introduction piece, the objectives and agenda, we're going to fill that in. Let's jump into that background section. So what is affordable housing? No news here. Pretty much a lift from the reports were created by the exploratory committee. It's consistent with our webpage and with most of, there's a real consensus around this. So what is done in here is we've actually put the numbers out for Old Lyme based on the most recent HUD limits. So that would put and included not just for a household size of 4, but for particularly considering that our strategy is going to respond to the trend that the household size is decreasing. We'll also have numbers in there for a household size of 1. And then I put a little "Did you know" box at the bottom of that to plug some of the background data on what the state of things is in Old Lyme. So this one of all should be pretty straightforward.
Excuse me, Michael, do you want to, like, will you go, did you know, question about 3,200 households spending more than 30% of their income? This may be too geeky or granular, but should we data source some of these?
Yes. I have a note on that one too. We haven't put all the footnotes in.
Oh, okay.
That's Partnership for Strong Communities 2020. But yes, that'll show up. Thanks, Amy. Okay, moving on. There are some relevant numbers for Old Lyme. Again, this is not meant to step on all the data that's coming in. It's just the objective of this page is just to set a backdrop and some context and some scale for the audience as we move through the discussion. So just some broad numbers on our demographics, number of residents, the median age and income, how many households there are, average household size, how many units we have. And in that one, I did put at the bottom, because they're approximate and because if you look at 2021 CIRC numbers, it doesn't match the 2010 census that DOH uses for our appeals listing, and it won't match 2020 either. So depending on exactly what week you take a snapshot of our number of residents and number of housing units it's going to change. So I put a disclaimer down there that's approximate. So some talking points on this. Well, first of all, Karen had a nice graphic in her deck that'll put in for the number of units. Here's something Bill, I don't know if you picked up on this one during the conversation on Monday, but Old Lyme in the lower Connecticut River Valley region, Old Lyme has the most seasonal houses at 26%.
Mhm.
So if we have roughly a quarter of 5,000 total units of our housing stock seasonal, that's basically increasing the threshold we need to reach 10% by 125 units. So that might be something we want to take up if there are any changes contemplated at 830G is to recognize seasonal units and take them out of the baseline.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, because if it were, that's, 3750 as your denominator is.
Yeah, that's material.
Yeah,
So
great.
also, I'm going to bring up that topic we've talked about again, which is if you look at what's contributing to the qualified units, the number one is in subsidized rentals, and in Old Lyme, that's mostly I think that's completely the two senior housing developments, and then number two is CHFA Mortgages, and distant third is deed restricted owner occupied. So this is kind of a setting the stage to talk about the role of what we've described as small A affordable housing, and through that may not be qualified up front through a deed restriction, but that could be qualified after the fact if a qualified owner takes out a CHFA mortgage, then it actually does become qualified. So I want to make that point as well. And that's why I wanted to put a graphic in there to visualize what the fraction of contribution is for each of these major categories, because there's a message in there.
Michael, on this page, I was wondering, it's probably not the appropriate place for it, but we've got our numbers here, and I was wondering if we had any place where we could be doing a comparison to the number of affordable units in other towns in the area.
Yeah, I thought about that, Amy, and it appears in a lot of the material. And so, and it's useful perspective, but my question is, for this audience and for what we need to do, does it matter? I think it's good to know, but I'm not sure if we're consistent with I think we can talk over it and say, we're consistent with a lot of small towns in this area. But, if we're different materially than Middletown, I'm not sure what that means for us.
Yeah. I think way back when we did, when we were just a committee, remember that very first sort of Excel we did where we showed we were at 1.8% or whatever, and broke it out by size of the town, basically. I think we were still pretty far down the list.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're in the bottom quintile and we're in there. But again, considering this audience and what our overall objective is, which is to get some background information out, get the community engaged in the conversation, and vet some of the thinking we have on strategy.
If anybody asks, we have the data.
Interest locally oriented, so I'm not sure if that's going to add to the conversation or just put more data out there that's going to distract from it. But I'm
like a red herring, I think. So people will lump onto that. Well, we have more than Madison does, so
yeah.
Actually, I hit that hover right here. But I agree. I think the more we can focus the conversation just on, us getting better and ideas,
And meeting the needs locally.
fighting, fighting the battle.
Okay, so this slide needs work, but most of the ideas are on there.
Yeah.
All right, the next one is making the case. And this is not aimed to have a lot of data in it. So the two major points for the case. The first is the gap. This is where we can talk about the 800, converting that 25% of the 3,200 into 800 odd housing. That should be households. I just picked up the typo there. Stand by. I'm going to edit that real time on what I'm looking at here. Okay, 800 plus households cost burdened versus the 85 affordable units in town with 0 available right now. There's a gap in starter homes, workforce housing for essential services and local businesses. We have the anecdotes that the volunteer services are struggling to find places where the people live, and senior housing, evidenced by the multi-year waiting lists. So didn't propose to put hard data in here other than to maybe some points. I guess I'll put that 2-year wait list in there for senior housing.
Yeah.
But generally have it be conceptual, and we'll get into and tee up the discussion about the data that comes later. And then the other major point of the case is the future economic health. And we can cite the Economic Development Commission study, the Rivercog housing study that we've seen, reinforce the notion that housing is tightly linked to the economy, and cite the demographics versus our current stock. And then a takeaway at the bottom that reinforces that it's an opportunity to meet the needs of the community that reflect the town's values and priorities. So I think that's a theme that we want to carry through. That this plan is not about meeting arbitrary quotas. It's about meeting real community needs now and for the future.
Mhm. I like that.
Okay, then a venture into statutes and regulations just for some backdrop. 830G. As you know from looking at it, it's large and complicated. But I tried to pull out the high points here as being it applies to 10% applies to towns with less than 10% of their housing qualified, and we're at less than 2%. That the state sets the qualifications requirements. Want to introduce this notion that developments with at least 30% of the units set aside and restricted as affordable can qualify, because we're going to want to talk about that as well later. And how the statute defines a process for developers to appeal denials with the burden of proof on towns. And there is that statistic from it's a study from, it's a few years ago, but the bottom line was that towns lose 70% of the appeal cases. But there's actually a state of Connecticut publication that cites that. And to your earlier point, Amy, we can have some footnotes in here for people that want to read more.
They probably don't.
At their peril. Okay, then 830J, that's why we're here, the mandate for the plan. And then without getting into it, I'm just going to recognize that state and federal fair housing and HUD income limits, so there are state and federal regulations that are brought to bear on this. So that's just that's aimed to be a 1-minute primer on the legal forces at work without getting into any of the millions of nuances that entails. And since we're talking about the flow, I'll diverge for a sec here. What we're thinking about is we're going to go through these presentations and then open up for Q&A and not have real-time Q&A. So we're going to try and get through the material and then have the discussion afterwards. So next there is 830G implications. So the backstory on this slide is to tee up the case that we're not going to be driven by the 10%. We're going to be driven by the local needs and the demand, the capacity, and the data, not the 10% one size fits all target that is imposed by 830G. So this pulls out the curves we did from the committee that just demonstrates how many units of additional housing we would need to meet the 10%, to meet various thresholds from 2 to 10%, at 30%, 50%, and 100% efficiency. Efficiency being the fraction of development that was affordable versus market rate. So what that shows us is that even at 100% efficiency, O-Line would need around 500 units, and at 30%, that would climb to over 2,000 units. Making the point that even at 100% efficiency, the 10% target is practically unachievable, realistically. But that regardless of the target, the second point here is that efficiency is very important. So as we go forward, our plan should aim to have any new development of affordable housing be accompanied by a minimal of market rate along with it, because that market rate housing just raises the baseline and moves the goalposts. So the talking point over this is with that is to reinforce that we don't propose to be driven by the 10%.
Yeah.
It was nice in the presentation that they dealt with the 10% by basically saying, I'm paraphrasing, that the purpose of the legislation is to increase affordable housing in the state, and that it's not, even in the state's terms, a hard number that has, I mean, you don't want to say that there's no consequences to it, but it's a goal. It's something to, an ideal to try to move toward. But the real goal is increasing the affordable housing stock in
Right,
any community.
Though there are consequences, Bill, in that until you achieve 10%. So with no debate on the notion that we won't be driven by it and that it is an aspirational goal. But in practice, until towns are at 10%, they're exposed to the appeals process, which can be onerous. So I think while we'll recognize that the 10% is aspirational, I don't think that takes away from, as part of our recommendations, having a legislative agenda that says that needs to be rationalized, because there is a punitive aspect to it. Not in the mainstream, but on the legislative agenda.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, there's so many different ways now that you could do it, like you had suggested earlier, Michael, some time ago, about raising the percentage that a developer has to come in and do. So why is it 30% of the units? You could have, 1,000 units and only 30% of them have to be affordable. They're making a mint off the rest of them, and so if you raise that to 50% or 60%,
I think 51% would be the absolute minimum, and 75% would be better, 80. But I don't know what the market force would be. But anyway, without going down that path too far, I think we want to leave it on the legislative agenda, but not get distracted by it as we're going through our local strategy.
That would be something that RiverCog is taking up too, right? I mean,
yeah. Yep. Okay. Next is pretty straightforward, people and process. I want to introduce the commission, got our names up there. How do you feel about sending in some selfies so we can you want to have pictures up there? We don't have to do that now. That can be a late breaking.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
And our priorities, which are already out there on our webpage. Okay, the next page is on the planning process and timeline. This is a little busy, but a couple of key messages here. One is that you can see I've got the workshop boxed. We're in the middle of this, not at the end. So we want to emphasize that we are and will continue to be listening to the community, and that up to now, there's been a lot of research and analysis, and we're starting to bring our thinking together on how to move forward and engage in the community on that. So that amongst all the dates and the little milestones there is a message that we are right in the middle of this process, and the community it's intended that the community is part of that. And it also puts a little calendar up so people can look forward on what's going to happen. Thoughts? So I'm looking at page 11 in the deck.
So I don't know if, I mean, people are going to hold us and say, you said you were having a public meeting. I know we talked a little bit about whether, and right now you said I'd like to keep it in, but do we have to decide before the workshop whether
Yeah.
we're going to publicize it?
Yeah, and
When I say publicize, even say that it has a placeholder in there.
no, I'm presuming by, good question, Bill. I'm presuming by then that we're going to have a hard decision on that.
Okay.
And I'm also, I'm not presuming, but my sense is we're going to want to hold it. We're going to want to have it. In the absence of a reason not to, we'll have the hearing.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity, I think. And I don't think it's going to be that contentious, but they're just going to be more informational, just like the workshops are probably, but probably more people will show up.
Yeah, if we do a good job at the 2 workshops, it should be quick.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to have.
Yep. So again, barring any guidance that it's a specifically bad thing to do, then I think we should do it. Just on the first principles that we want to keep the public in this.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, then we're going to switch to the current thinking. So here's an attempt on page number 13 of just laying out some of the guiding principles that we're invoking. So the first, that this is the beginning of a community conversation, not the end.
Yep.
That this is a living document that's not going to be put on the shelf, and it's actually going to be used to guide decisions and capture lessons learned. That were aimed first and foremost to meet the needs of Old Lyme residents in all life stages and walks of life, which is consistent with what we've already posted on our webpage. It needs to preserve Old Lyme as an essentially small town and embody our established values and priorities. That it's going to be informed by the POCD, local and regional, and the regional housing plan, and not emerge from a vacuum. That we'll consider relevant. This gets to the 10% thing. We'll consider relevant policies and practices and comply with statutory requirements, but we're not going to be driven by arbitrary goals and thresholds. So that's just trying to lay out the guiding principles for the more detailed thinking that follows. Does that all look right? And do we miss anything? And I'll note that as a backdrop to this, I've looked at the town website, I've looked at the work that the Economic Development Commission did and the POCD, and I remain convinced that we don't need to go back to the drawing board for community values. It's out there.
Yeah.
Very consistently in a lot of different places. I think we can articulate it and recap it, but I wouldn't propose that we open it up for discussion, because they are time tested and well established. So
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get a lot of pushback on anything on that slide.
No.
It might be somewhat of a relief for people to see that slide.
Yeah.
Good. And for us, we're going to have another couple of laps around this track. So if anything comes up, we've got 3.5 weeks until this. So I feel pretty good about where we are in terms of having material and our thinking together on it. We just have to get it captured and and scripted for this, for the workshop. It's our first time out, so we want to get it right. Okay, on to the strategy. So this recaps the three-pronged approach we talked about: the near-term opportunities, establishing a more conducive environment, and creating opportunities. So pretty much a lift from what we had discussed and even published before.
Yeah.
The factors slide. So the forces at work slide. That, I think that has a lot of good stuff in it, but it's a mess to try and present to a public, to a community meeting, that people who haven't been engaged in this for a long time. So I'm gonna boil this down to 3 or 4 key points that can be talked over. We'll keep this as something to look at and make sure we're covering all the bases that we've talked about. But this needs to be radically boiled down and made presentable for a first community workshop.
Yeah, there's one, Michael, I'm just not sure about it. You're under post-pandemic, and it says increased market headwind for affordable. And that just, I think people might go, what does that mean?
Right. So we have to talk about what that means. You're exactly right. We have to put what it means instead of the concept. So it means that expensive homes are selling, and there's less incentive for a developer to come in and create affordable housing when they can sell premium homes.
Yeah.
So that's you've exemplified exactly what needs to be done to this slide, which is have it distilled down into some digestible takeaways.
Well, maybe what you just said is really what that should be replaced by.
Exactly. And that needs to be done across the board on this slide. So I left this in here as a placeholder, but it's at this point, it's hardly worth even discussing because there's so much work left to be done on it. That's my next project, mini project.
I think it's really great to have all these things down here.
Except don't say decreasing young population though.
Right. Selected decrease in young. No, we'll say what again, Jen, here, we'll say what it means.
Yeah, that's good.
We'll say what it is, not the concept.
Old people are moving out, new people are moving in.
All right. Next page, 16.
I don't want to belabor this, but that was just the one thing, and I don't know where when they do their presentation, is one of the selling or the salient points that's important in affordable housing is the change in the demographics, especially the population is aging. That's absolutely true. If they emphasize that part of it was saying, and there's not enough, the birth rate is declining overall. There's not enough young people to take the place of the old people that are moving out. But if at the same time we're saying, but who else do you think is going to buy the big homes but young people with children? I just want to, that concerns me. Because
it's partly because, Bill, their data isn't Old Lyme. Their data is the whole region, and which includes Middletown. And so it skews the data disproportionately for towns like Lyme and Old Lyme.
Right.
And actually, if you look at the town level projections, it's more nuanced than that, Bill.
Right.
So young, decreasing young, what's young? There's actually three or four cohorts within young. And not all of them are decreasing. So
just be careful with it. I don't know.
That's why, again, that's why nothing resembling this is actually going to be put up. This is
well, that's not true.
This is my notes.
these are important things because they are notes that are, if you really look at the stuff that's on the left, those are real factors. They
Yep.
really are very, very real factors. It's
And
just how do we
this is the stuff I sent to you guys. If you really want to scare yourself, you should look at this mind map I have of all the stuff that's out there. That's just this morass. It's crazy. But
Those are
anyway,
oh yeah.
okay. So slide 16. So this is a conversion of the Goldilocks slide. Because actually the question Karen asked at our last meeting kind of triggered me to say, it's not obvious what we're thinking about in that slide, even though it was kind of graphically cute. It was, I wanted to try and come up with a more, even though there's a lot on it, a more straightforward representation of what we're thinking here. So that table at the top of it goes through the development modalities on the left: one-off single family, low set aside developments, large scale multifamily, rehab, repurpose existing ADUs, and small scale high set aside developments. And then tried to do kind of a traffic light representation of what limitations they're triggering from land and water. And also I added zoning in there. And then I have those grouped so that they bundle up into a strategy. So I won't go through every piece of that, but just, does that resonate with you guys?
Yeah, I like that. I like the bottom part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the bottom part too. The top part though, I just found a little bit confusing. Or not confusing.
It's busy, at least.
I think maybe if you describe the land water zoning, maybe just there's a merged cell title above it that says maybe limited by.
Yep, limitations. I like that, Jen. Yes.
Yeah.
Let me make a note to myself here. That's not something I can do in real time. When I retired, I promised myself I wasn't going to do this PowerPoint stuff anymore.
Sucks you in.
So much for that.
Michael, also missing middle. At some point that needs to be defined a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
I think we took that out of the Goldilocks diagram.
Okay.
This was what that middle was.
But it's a range of things that it might be pointed out specifically there, like is it going to be townhouses or duplexes or
Once again, Amy, I'll go back and use again what you had suggested from that previous slide, which is instead of invoking new terminology and new concepts, is just say what it is, which I will do, and not label it.
Yeah, I mean, you could even, on the third bullet, you could even just take out missing middle and just put the bottom three approaches.
Yeah, or put in
or something. It's just because I think you took
small
that
multiplex
Goldilocks slide.
ADUs and rehabbing existing properties, and just say what it is instead of giving it a name and having that you have to define.
Yep.
Good, great feedback. Okay, and I think that's it for this. There'll need to be some kind of segue slide. Let's sum up, but this is the core of it. And then we will switch to data. Open that one up.
Okay.
Okay. So on this one, let's skip down to page 18, which is the housing needs assessment slide. Now you can go back and look, but that set of pages we just went through is aimed to incorporate everything that's in number 1 to 17 in the second one, and just reorders it and rewrites it and reemphasizes it. So housing needs assessment. So there's like 60 pages of this. So we're going to need to kind of move through it and capture some feedback. My understanding from working with the SLR folks is that this is going to get boiled down as well. We're going to have to pick out some of the high points that tie back to the strategy, and that add to the information base without being a full-fledged in detail academic study, because we're not going to have, I don't think we're going to have the time, and the folks there won't have the bandwidth to incorporate all of that. But we will keep all this and we'll put it online and have it accessible as reference material, and keep it as an appendix. So it won't be thrown out. It'll just be sort of summarized for the purposes of discussion at the workshop. And but definitely there's a lot of good stuff in here that we're going to want to retain and have access to as reference material. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so 18 is just the outline of what's coming forward. Existing conditions. So we've got a zoning map here. Here's a general comment I had, and which is each time that we're going to put a page up with any kind of granular data on it, there needs to be some takeaway message so that folks can tie the data or the picture to what the thinking is. And this would be one of those.
I would agree. I don't know what any of the zoning codes mean myself.
Right. So that's on the left.
Yeah, I can see that, but
So here's a specific one. So the multifamily the MFR codes are a tiny fraction of the acreage in town.
right.
So those kinds of takeaways. So where we'd overlay,
you just do
it's 90%
Yeah.
residential, single family.
Yeah.
Although that's up there, the RU40 comprises vast majority of the land area, but we want to call those out.
Yeah. I mean, that was be for kind of techie people, but if you even want to just do like maybe differentiate the colors a little bit better, those two greens, so that we know what we're talking about, but just have a color thing. This is rural residence, this is residence, this is multifamily, this is commercial.
So we'll need to work with that. Although this is good. The nice part about the map is you get more than just how much there is of it, but where it is, which is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'd leave the map, just maybe
We could change the color.
code the legend a little bit crisper.
Yeah, and in reality, we'll tell the audience that this is going to be online. You're going to have the opportunity to go back and review it to your heart's content. But there's no way in this setting, in this time frame, that we're going to be able. I mean, we could spend a whole meeting just going through the map with one page.
And the rest of it, I'm assuming, is like town and commercial.
Yep.
Okay.
So. Okay, placeholder on the next one, which is infrastructure and buildable land. So representation there again. So if you think about the zoning map and then this work in progress on the buildable land, as we're going through this section, think of tying back into some of the points we're trying to make and some of the key factors that are influencing our thinking on strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So the prior slide, takeaway message, primarily single family, residential, very little multifamily. This next page is going to outline the constraint on buildable land. So trying to draw some lines around our thinking and to reinforce not just what we're doing, but what got us there.
Yep. Did you want to, on the previous slide, include this seasonal homes?
Yeah, we need to, although that, I'm not sure that is, so that's in the R10 down there. So the takeaway there was less on the zoning area, and it was more about the number of units that there were
Right,
as a fraction of
the total.
the year-round residents, and the impact that has on the 10% threshold.
Yeah, so maybe we just
it-
leave it. then.
I don't know, but isn't it interesting, with the exception of the one little area up here that's an R10, up in the, I guess that's the
Rogers Lake.
northwest,
That's Rogers
yeah,
Lake.
Rogers Lake, right? That's 25% of our housing stock in those, in those 2-3 little spots. When you look at the whole town, that's kind of amazing.
Yep.
Michael,
So
is
informative.
there a spot on the zoning where the map is, when you say comprises vast majority of land area, to actually put the percentages on there, maybe even in a highlighted color?
Yeah, if they have it. So part of what we're going to be doing with our grant is doing the build out analysis. So that'll come up with some of the granular data on it. So I think between the map, the picture, and highlighting that's the vast majority. I mean, if we can come up with a rough number, yeah, we by acreage, we'll do that. But I don't think we'll lose the message if that's not ready yet. Okay, then the infrastructure and buildable land, same idea. What are the practical limitations? And good takeaway there. These limitations constrain development options. And then we'll have a proposal for how to work within those constraints. Same, the page after that is going to be on some of the environmental considerations. So, and if you think back to that slide with all the boxes on it on the forces at work, we want to tie that slide to be the preamble into this.
Yeah. 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 I mean, you're painting a good picture of it. If you take the 100% minus the 20% protected land, minus the 26%, that is, seasonal, then whatever, it's what do we have left over?
Overlay that with the 93% of properties that are already owned and developed.
And the town properties, yeah.
So
It's good.
there's a lot of data, but there's some strong, unto compelling support for some of our thinking.
Well, I guess when it's now they are going to be presenting this, right?
Yeah, this is where at this point we'll have turned it over to SLR.
Because they did a pretty good job of like just not reading slides to you. They getting to the essence of it. So it's almost something like you have that graphic of the map of the town, for example. But that's the takeaways are the most important pieces. So you want to have them spend, not that they gloss over the data, but that dizzies people. But the takeaways are the most important pieces.
Exactly. When you have a data slide, you don't read the data to the audience. You do the takeaways, and then you cite some of the selected data on there that emphasizes and supports your point.
Right.
All right, 23, plan of conservation development reference, which I think is important. And it gets to one of the principles we had back there, which is that it's going to consider the other relevant works. Existing conditions and demographic trends. So we're going to need to go through these and make sure everything ticks and ties. Put the data origin disclaimers on and sourcing that you talked about, Amy. But again, and for every one of these, we're going to need to have a takeaway box.
Yep.
And that's at the bottom of this. But we're going to need to go through those too.
I like that. And SLR is going to be working on this, or do you need help with that?
Yeah.
SLR's got the data set, so they're going to be doing that. And that's part of what we're getting from RiverCog just as part of our base package. That doesn't include that isn't part of the buy-up we did.
Okay.
They're going through all this.
Perfect.
And it's not just SLR, so it's some of Don Poland's work too, which is really good. So I think our job over the next couple of iterations here is going to be to go through these key messages and just make sure everything flows and is consistent. Age distribution, here we go, on slide 26. Which is different now. So this is 2010 to 2019. So that chart I had sent you, Jen,
Yep.
has for Old Lyme. We're gonna have to go through this and make sure we're all looking at the same data, or at least we have picked which data we're gonna present.
Yeah, it's
So
confusing.
the data that I had looked at actually had that a bump in the middle age there. That
Is your 15 to 19.
no, I was looking at the 35 to 45 demographic there.
That one, yeah.
I saw some data where that's increasing
Yeah.
or projected to increase through 2040.
How
But
do
we'll
they
see
do
what-
that, Michael, when they combine data sets like that? How can they combine like 3 different data sets into one table? And
Yeah. So we're gonna need to. I have a note on this. We need to figure out what demographic projection we're going to.
And it
work with
certainly
going
won't
forward.
be the 2000 census. That's like, that's so old.
Yeah, and we're also going to have to recognize that the pandemic is going to put a kink in all the data now.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had, I mean, the largest increase in the school population has been from people moving here in the last 2 years. So
Right. So we can't look at the 2020, 2021 housing market and say, well, that's a leading indicator for a trend, because
definitely not a trend. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other factor somebody brought up yesterday was oh, maybe they'll go back. I was like, they're going to move to Old Lyme, buy a $750,000 house, and then go back to Brooklyn. I don't think so. So anyhow, there's a lot of, like, oh, maybe they will, maybe they won't. So
Maybe they won't.
so it's just got to be sort of directionally correct, I think. And for us, for the affordable housing, I think we have to make sense of what this means. Like, how does this relate to the increasing the diversity of housing stock?
Exactly, Jen. We have to figure out
Not just showing a chart.
which of these projections and which data are we going to use are we going to interpret as decisionable and use to actually as the basis for our planning?
Yeah.
And if we can't, then we don't.
Yeah.
And if there is none, then we leave it as. And this is where I don't know if I've talked about scenario-based planning for you, but with you, but if you get in a situation where you're not sure, then an approach is to describe the handful of plausible scenarios that could play out based on what we know right now, have contingency plans for each of those, and then identify what the leading indicators are that are going to tell you that that's the scenario that's playing out and that's the direction we should move. So that's a planning approach that I've used in the past, and I think we can use that here when there's not enough data, or the data is all over the place, and you can't, and you're not comfortable identifying data as being something that you want to hang your hat on and make decisions on it.
Yeah, so we had talked in the past, about the elderly population, right? So one part of the elderly population doesn't want to leave their house, right? And they can afford to stay there. The other part of the elderly population are alone, singles, and they want to downsize and stay in town. And there's not enough affordable rents or smaller homes for them to live in. So that clearly is still an issue because of the increasing dynamics of that demographic group, right? So that coupled with, perhaps a slight bump in, younger families moving in, or that middle age kind of family moving in or whatever. And then you've got the standard problem that everybody has is the workforce. Where do the teachers, the firemen, the grocery store workers, like where does that sort of, lower, it's not lower AMI, it's for us, it would probably be like the mid AMI, group. Where do they live if we want them to be able to live affordably in Old Lyme?
So we're going to have to be thoughtful and define what we're doing here. Another example would be the aging population. So, we could get into some of the fine details of what exact cohort is going in what direction and what year. But overall, I think I'd suggest there's some fairly compelling data that the boomers are retiring, the population is aging, the wait lists for senior housing indicate that there's not enough. So we can go down, we can plan with some confidence that we need more of that.
Right.
Without needing to get into details. Some of the other more nuanced stuff we may need to understand better and have more confidence in, but
we have to make them move to Waterford or Florida.
Okay. Where are we?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Household composition. Pretty straightforward. We're just going to need to identify the source and go with it. I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit here. So
Yeah.
catch me if the takeaways are there. And here's a summary. Population is predicted to decline significantly. I put a question mark on that one.
Ever.
Because I've seen varying results. Population is aging and not being replaced with young. I want to your earlier point, Jen, I want to make sure that we're not getting caught up in the regional trend here and make sure this is based on local data.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I mean, it's like if you hear from the realtors, like the houses stay on the market 2 weeks, so that so it's I don't believe this this slide or the previous two at all. And my point is, like, how does that impact affordable housing planning? I don't think that it necessarily does. So
Yeah, and to the last point on the slide, about the small senior households.
yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, the only question I have on that is, or the nuance is that it will cause residents to move out if they can,
Right. Sure. Yeah.
because some people get stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the most significant need in Old Lyme is creating that place where they can stay. And maybe it's not in their house, but maybe it's somewhere in Old Lyme.
Okay. 29 of 70. Here we go.
Keep going.
Housing market trends. This is how long. I think that the takeaway here is owner versus rentals, and then turnover. So we may want to boil some of this down.
I don't think it's relevant. Again, it's kind of like to Amy's earlier point. We're comparing something to something else, which for our purposes we don't need to know.
Yep. Good. And I'm going to put that as a theme. So we'll make comparisons when it's a case study that we want to draw on one way or the other and learn from, but not just because it's there.
Yeah.
Okay. Distribution. That's interesting. So, and this actually does tie to a point earlier. If we believe that household size is decreasing, our current stock is predominantly 3+ bedroom, fairly large homes. So the overarching the overarching theme there is that there's a mismatch in our current stock with what the needs are going to be in the future.
Yep, I like that.
More digging on slide 32 into the types.
Okay.
We may want to combine some of these into the highest level takeaways and tie it back to, the need for senior housing, don't have rental units.
Yeah.
And that the big takeaway here is that 89% of the stock is single family detached. And of that, the majority is 3+ bedrooms.
Yep. That's perfect right there.
So if you need something other than a single family detached home with 3 or more bedrooms, then you're unlikely to find it in O-line. And that's the
That's
the
the
top
perfect
level message there.
box. Yeah, that's the perfect takeaway box right there.
Values. This might be interesting to back up. So the median income or the median home price, which is close to $400,000.
Mm-hmm.
So we can add to that prior takeaway of, if you're looking for something that's other than single family detached with 3 or more bedrooms that costs less than $400,000, you're unlikely to find it in O-line.
Yep. Yeah, I was looking for an under 200,000 house earlier last year, and they could tell you there was generally one on the market at a time.
Yep. And not for long.
And not for long, no.
Okay, I'm on 34 now. Rental costs. I'm not sure how much data we need on this, but I think the takeaway for rentals in O-line is the lack of stock, not necessarily the price.
Yeah, this is also a very old data source.
I saw more recent data that's
Similar.
that has the average rent around 1,300,
Sure.
which puts it in the affordable range for less than 80% AMI.
Yeah.
So again, without getting distracted by this too much, I think the key message around rentals is that they're just a tiny fraction of the stock in town.
Yep.
Yeah, the fact that 15.6% of them are under $1,000 doesn't tell you a whole lot because how many units are they?
Right. So if that's 3 units,
Yeah, you would need some sort of context around.
I wonder if that gets whatever. I don't know. And
yeah. So
of the X number of rental units, 15.6% are under.
right. So looking at the data with the average rent being around $1,300, which puts it in range for being affordable. I think the main message around rentals is the stock.
Yeah.
Is the number of units, not necessarily the cost of the units.
Yeah. I agree.
right.
And I don't think bullet 3 is necessary at all.
Yeah. Okay. This is something that's useful because you look at the number of permits. So there was a boom around the turn of the century, a bust during the Great Recession, some recovery, and then a decline in the second decade, and then a pop last year, which we're attributing to the pandemic. But if you look at the absolute numbers, so the average number of housing permits over the past 5 years has been like 5 or 6, I think. So there's a message here that the development rate in O-Lyme, is going to be a real challenge if we're trying to provide additional housing in any form, just because development rates are so low.
Mhm.
And there's a bigger story there about tying back into the economy. And I think this reinforces a couple of points. So one is conversion of existing stock instead of new. The whole strategy of additional deed restricted housing is challenged by the development rate, but it speaks to the economic climate. But I think this is good to get out there. The development rates are the lowest, they are low,
Mhm.
and the pandemic pop notwithstanding, we don't know if that's going to recover to anything resembling the past.
Yep.
So you look at the past 2016 to 2019, 8.4, 8.2.
Yep.
Well, also, the last 15 years, there has been less new building than there were in the 5 previous.
Yep.
I just quickly did the numbers.
So even if you take out the outliers of the recession and the pandemic on each end, and you just look to the middle, it's declining.
Yeah. And we can't ignore the fact that Pfizer was tripling in size during those first 5 years of 2000s, and
Yep.
their significant developments were built, and they had 90% Pfizer households in them.
I live in one of them.
I do too. I did. And Beach Farms, Beach Farms is 90% Pfizer people.
I'm just taking a note here.
So that's kind of like those developments in East Lyme, where they quickly built when we bought Ann Arbor and people over and stuff.
Yep.
And, I don't know who's living there now, but.
And
just want to
digress a little bit. EB has been, I think they just announced another growth spurt.
Yeah.
And we probably want to dig into this actually as we go in, but Old Lyme is not really participating in a boom because of that.
Yeah, it's there. So their
Because it's lower.
Yeah, their median income is $60,000.
Yeah, so this ties back to our median home price of $400K. That
Right.
even the entry level engineers aren't able to afford that.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good point. For persuasion.
Yep.
So I'm going to have to go in about probably 10 minutes. I have another Zoom meeting following this at 7. And I have to do a couple of, eat. Is Amy still with us?
Oh, I haven't been looking at the,
I've been
looking at
slides.
my panel here. It looks like she did drop.
We can. I think maybe why don't we just keep going, Michael, through them so that we could have a proper meeting and adjourn it before we lose a quorum.
Well, we have a quorum with the three of us.
Oh, we still do? Okay.
Yeah. So when
still have
Joe,
a
when you
quorum.
go,
I will have to leave though in about 10 minutes.
then at which point we will adjourn. So let's just go through and I'll say again, this is not the final run we're going to have at this.
Yeah.
But
And
we've
we can
already taken away some good points for the next lap.
Okay. So we got that on 36. We get that takeaway.
Okay, 36 takeaways. Which is we'll tune this one up.
Yeah, this is what we just said. Yep.
Needs assessment. This is key. So look at the takeaway at the bottom of this. There are 935 households in Old Lyme, 29% of total, who meet the definition of low income.
Yep.
And you put that up against the 85 units. And here we are. So more homeowner need than rental need, but this is likely due to lack of rental options. Check.
Mm-hmm.
True that. So that again goes back to our point on the earlier slide. So this is starting to come together, and this is one of the more compelling.
Yeah. No, I love this slide. This is the best slide so far.
Yep, it is, and it gets right back to what we've been saying since the beginning, which is this is not about some hypothetical population in some hypothetical town in some hypothetical future. It's right here in Old Lyme today.
Yeah. Yeah. Although also the data is a little bit old, but but it's still good.
Yep. Yeah, although in general, I think that age would not mean that it's gotten better.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so we don't need to spend a lot of time in here, but this slide is if we show one slide, this might be it.
Mhm. Yep, I like both of those slides, 38, 39.
Yep.
Oh, and also 40, I guess.
Yep. So I think these are part of the absolute foundation of our thinking, which is the need. We've talked a lot about the existing inventory and the capacity. I wonder if we shouldn't lead with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very compelling, like the shock value kind of,
Yep.
up front, and then go into maybe some of those more boring slides, around the graphs.
Yep. Uh, 41. We may want to distill this down
Yeah.
because this is a slightly different view. So this talks about cost. So there's cost burdened versus, not versus, but slightly differentiated from qualifying as low income on HUD limits, based
This
on
is
HUD
more
limits.
like Alice type.
Yeah.
Stuff. Yeah. But I mean, which also includes low income, but
Yeah. So
yeah.
cost burdened, I think, is a superset of the officially qualified
Mhm.
low income categories. So I think we want to go through this. Remember, start with what the key messages are, that we've got a significant population that is in need, or the way we've worded it before is that would benefit from additional affordable housing.
Yeah.
And then get some of this material in to bring it home.
Yep.
Okay, this is kind of a methodology slide. I'm not sure we want to do this on 42.
Yeah.
And this again.
It's gonna all get backup, I think, those,
Yeah, these are backups. So, and I'm not sure how much we're gonna have
For
to
a
talk about this.
forum, yeah, for a public conversation, I think it's way too much detail as far as
Yeah, and
charts.
it gets to some of what we talked about goal setting. So yeah, we can set some goals, and I'm not opposed to that as long as they're not arbitrary goals, if they're thoughtful goals. And I think it's good to understand what the magnitude of the need is. But from a practical perspective, our inventory of affordable housing is so low, and you combine that with the number of families that could benefit from it, and we could do just about anything in any category for the foreseeable future, and it would be meaningful.
Yeah, and if you think that Karen should keep the audience in mind, this is an audience of people who are just concerned about Section 8 housing moving into the town, probably. So,
Yep.
so we don't need to like overload their brains with a bunch of data. I don't think in this first session, but we have all the data available if they'd like to do that. But in this conversation that we're trying to create about what it is and what we're trying to do, and where the gap is. I think that's it. And then like some of this, the numbers, the numerical data is going to be too much for the people of Old Lyme, frankly.
Yeah, I actually talked to them specifically about what approach we're going to take for this workshop, which
Okay.
is, and we're going to take a deductive logic approach, where basically you state your hypothesis and where you got to, and then you show the data that supports it, rather than showing all the data and trying to lead people to the same place and generate the same hypothesis together, because that could take a long time.
Yeah, I agree.
So that approach, I hope, came through in the intro. We're basically trying to tee up the current thinking, and then as we get into the data, tie it back and reinforce it.
Yeah.
The summary of that section that you have on slide 45 has the pertinent pieces from those last things. So sometimes, yep. So those are important. I think that's like a good takeaway.
We might actually want to pull that slide up into the intro.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would pull all like 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, you know,
To the front.
yeah, or the backup.
Oh, yes. Yep. We're going to have a substantial, we've already talked about this, and that there's going to be, a lot of this is going to wind up in the backup. So I don't think there'll be any resistance from
Yeah,
that.
'cause we were thinking like a minute 30 a slide, you know.
Oh yeah, just from a practical standpoint,
so,
we'd be
yeah.
there all night to go through this stuff.
Already we've lost 2 people, so out of 4.
Yeah, that's our job.
I'm going soon, but it's not because of that.
I know.
Okay, I'll just go quick then.
There
So
you
the
go.
survey results,
All right.
there were only 100 people from Old Lyme
Right.
the bad news is that there were only 100 people from Old Lyme that did that. So it's out of 6,000 voters, it's not a statistically significant fraction of our population. The good news is it was actually one of the higher response rates from the
It is
region.
pretty good, actually.
But nonetheless, what I talked about with Karen was not getting into the granular data, but just saying what the key takeaways were, if there were any, and specifically acknowledging that we can't hang our hat on 100 responses, but here are some things we saw that were interesting and that we're going to follow up on, and we're also going to combine it. They have the data from the surveys that were done by Advanced CT for the Economic Development Commission in 2019, which is relatively short time ago. So we're going to try and bundle up survey data, the survey results, into a summary with very highly selected, maybe a page of granular data to reinforce it, but not go through a whole section on it.
Okay.
The about the respondents was good, even though it is a small person. Those are good numbers. Even though it's based on 100 people, they're good numbers.
Yep.
I do have to.
Okay.
Again.
Okay. I will.
I'm open to, if we, whatever.
Jen, we can stay on and chat if you want.
Sure. Do we have to adjourn first? And then...
Yeah, let's adjourn first.
Michael, is there still somebody, a call-in person here, or is that?
There is a caller on the line that I see, but I don't know who it is.
Okay.
It's not John.
Great. Okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Aye.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, Bill. Our meeting is adjourned, and we'll be back around this. And Bill, offline, if you have any additional comments, you know where to find me. Just send them in, and I'll incorporate that into the next round of discussions.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank
Well,
you.
Are you looking to schedule another meeting? Are you going to try to schedule another meeting?
Yeah. Let me get through early next week. I think we will at least want to schedule a special meeting to review the final materials, pretty close to the 15th.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Bill.
All right, bye.
Have a good night.
Good night. Thanks, you guys too.